Hi again, everybody. We're back in the Cobb TV studios with Chairman Mike Boyce for our weekly conversation. Chairman, how are you?
Well, what day is it? That kind of a week.
It depends on when you're watching the video.
Yeah, that's true, right.
A lot of activity in the last commission meeting, including some good news about what's going on down in Cumberland when it comes to the Motel Tax and how that money's going to be used.
Yeah, and there's a lot of moving parts in the Cobb economy. We derive our revenue from many different sources, but specifically one of them is the Motel Tax, which is levied against, obviously, people staying in hotels and motels around here. But there are specific uses that we can use that money for. And it was very interesting this week. The Motel Tax is brought in more revenue than we projected. And again, I keep calling it this wacko budget system that we have, and you can quote me. The law requires us to take those tax revenues and spend them by September 30th within certain guidelines. We just can't use it anywhere. The problem is that we do not know the exact amount of what we're going to get from that tax until after September 30th. So we're being asked to buy things with the projection that that money is going to actually come in and fulfill that obligation. So what happened this year was that we made a projection on how much we were going to get from Motel Tax. We used it to help buy down the bond debt. But it turns out that the tax brought in more revenue than we thought it would. So in an effort to put more money back into the general fund, we were allowed to go and use some of that hotel tax money that was in excess above and beyond what we thought we were going to use it for, and we put it into the Cumberland Service District pot of money, which allowed us to take $500, $1,000 out of that and put it back into the general fund. So if you're just as confused as I am, congratulations. But the bottom line is that the county economy is really going. The engine's well oiled. So we're bringing in a significant amount of revenue, more than we projected, which is great. But how we use that money, we have to be very, very careful that we don't get into trouble. So this whole item was originally put on consent, but I watching what happens on the national scale, sometimes people don't know the impact of what happens if you put it on a consent agenda because it's not really discussed. It's a public document, but the reality is most people are busy and they don't have time to sit down and read the consent agenda. So by bringing it on the regular, we're showing people in our open and transparent manner that you are in fact getting more revenue, but here's what we're doing it so you can see how we're spending it.
And our finance director gave a nice presentation trying to explain this, but really it comes down to just kind of an awkward bookkeeping thing because of, like you said, we're dealing with money kind of already spent.
Yeah, and the other part is that as I try to get my arms around this wacko system, what I made a commitment to the commissioners is that next year, probably in July, we'll have a pretty good idea of how much that Motel Tax is going to bring in. And I said for starters, why don't we just go ahead and assume that it's going to be just as good as it was this year. So that'll allow us next summer to take a look at those extra monies and find a way for all the commission to address that extra money rather than this year because the expediency and we didn't get out the word soon enough to the board members, so we went ahead and made a decision. This time I want that decision to be made by the whole board next summer, and I'm committed to doing that.
And when we're talking about trying to deal with budgets and what's coming up in the future, when Mabry Park was on the agenda for this last meeting, it was pushed back several weeks, but it's not a question of whether it will be built, it's a question of how will we operate it.
Yeah, correct. Now this was a tough call. Mabry Park has been on the books for many years. There's the expectation by the public that they were going to get this park. So what happened was several months ago, we went ahead and allowed the process to go and bid to put out an RFP, a request for a proposal, from companies to construct the park. And we got the bids in last month. So the staff put all the papers together and then put it on the agenda to be addressed at the meeting last Tuesday. The problem is that for months we've been wrestling with this issue that we never connected SPLOST projects with the operations and maintenance money that needs to go to operate and run those parks. And it's not just a park. It can be, it was the new library last month. It's going to be a new senior center or the modified senior center in the future. So what happens is we approve the SPLOST, but because we don't connect it to the operation and maintenance to run the park or the library or the facility, that comes out of the general fund. And then we find ourselves trying to find money in the general fund, you know, to open it up. And anyone who's a normal says, this is crazy to build something and then not staff it and run it. Just makes you look bad. So what I've been trying to do is connect the two. Unfortunately, you know, the timing on how we did this didn't favor Mabry Park. It could have been anything else, all right? The difference between Mabry Park and the library, the Sewell Mill Library last month, is the Sewell Mill Library, it was going to use 2018 money because that library is opening up in December. So we needed to address that problem right now, because if we didn't, there'd be penalties associated with it. We'd be paying out of the general fund because we didn't open it up. The Mabry Park is just like Hyde Park and Felton Park in this county. They are parks that are either already opened or are going to be open, but they're not staffed. So, and we'll be using, once you approve that, then you're obligated to go ahead and fund opening the operating expenses. So I said, this is crazy. We spend all our time here arguing about these projects because we never connected the two. And unfortunately, Mabry Park fell into that, you know, that doldrum there between the past and the future. But the future is going to be in 3 weeks when we bring this thing back to the agenda item, because by then we'll have had the retreat, where we're going to be talking about 2019 money, which is what we need to operate this park. So when Mabry Park is voted on on November 14th, not only will we be voting on the construction of it, but there'll be a hard commitment to also to fund it to be open and run by staff when it opens up in 2019.
Right. And speaking of the retreat, we talk about them fairly often. They're pretty common for boards and commissions across the metro to attend, but this one's a little different because some of the issues you were just talking about will be the focus of this, how we're going to pay for stuff down the line. Right. It's a really focused retreat. Yes,
it is. As you know, I got a lot of experience doing budgets on my background, but I've also, you know, a lot of experience running, you know, governments themselves. Being a command officer in the Marine Corps, there's a lot of similarities to being a chairman of the board here. And you have to, if you don't know where you're going, you'll get there. And what I'm trying to do is bring in a process where we as a board collectively know what the issues are, and then I'm expecting out of this retreat, they give me some guidance of how they want me to build this budget. And they're going to have a very hands-on approach as to, first of all, finally identifying what it is we consider mandated programs, what we consider essential programs, and what we consider desired programs. The mandated programs are obviously those that the legislation requires us to fund. The district attorney, the sheriff's office, the judges. There are some programs here that we have to pay for. The essential programs are those that we deem important, that reflect the quality of government that we want, of service we want to provide to the county here in Cobb County, that the people have expected us to provide. And then we have the desire, which is always the nice to haves. You don't need to have it. It's not important to a part of our strategic plan, but it can be connected directly or indirectly to it. And it's something that governments might want to bring to enhance the quality of life of a county, which is an important feature to bringing business here to the county, which brings jobs, which allows us to continue this five-star county that we have here and pay for those kind of services. So the retreat next week is very, very important. It's going to finally put to bed these issues like Mabry Park and Hyde Park, where now in the future we know exactly what we're going to be buying and how we're going to pay for it. The county manager, Rob Hosack, has put together a 5-year plan, so we can see down the road what we're trying to do, connected to the new strategic plan that is being modified right now and updated because it expires in 2018. All these pieces are coming together, the confluence of this retreat next week, where we have a lot of decisions to make in a very short period of time.
But I think it's important to point out, once we get this direction and determine what's considered maybe a desired service in the county, there will be significant amount of time for the public to weigh in on that before the final decisions are made.
Exactly. What'll happen is that I will spend the time between the retreat and in January putting together some draft budgets, straw mans as I call them, run them by the board, and then once we get a general consensus about, okay, I think this is what's going to work, then we'll go on our roadshow and start showing the public, okay, this is what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it and how much this is going to cost you.
And as we mentioned in this forum, you'll have that roadshow, but you'll also be taking in some opinions and
Oh, absolutely.
thoughts from
The
people.
purpose of the roadshow is to do exactly that. Now, look, we have email, we have telephone calls. There's a lot of ways for people to give us input. But I also am very sensitive to the fact that people are busy. They have a lot of things going on in their life. And the reality is this government provides them quality services, so they generally don't have to worry about how things run here. But they are very sensitive to how we spend their money. And I think it's very important that we get out there and show them why it is we're asking them to give us a certain amount of money and what we're going to give them in return.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, the retreat next week will be very important.
Right.
So we'll be back here next week with some important information about what came out of
It
that.
should be one of the more interesting talks with you on this program.
Right. So always follow us on our Facebook page and Twitter as well, because some of that information will come out there. And we'll see you back here next week.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ross.